You've all heard of it. Your first reaction was probably some shade of laughter, and if it wasn't, I don't know if I trust you. The Hunting Horn is one of two blunt weapons in mainline Monster Hunter, sharing the title with Hammer. It's one of the longer weapons and requires its user to focus on positioning in order to make the most of a simple moveset. On top of that, you have the ability to play musical buffs for you and anyone close enough, greatly enhancing both you and your teammates. I'd like to preface this tutorial by just saying that it likely isn't anywhere near as complicated as you think it is, so I won't be explaining charge blade combo paths or ridiculous caveats to otherwise sensible rules. This weapon follows a logic that makes a lot of sense, and it's easy to play around with as soon as you get that. And just for transparency, I'll be using basic early game equipment to show the thing off. Low rank bone armor with the first level of bagpipes, so the song set is basic, the skills fit, and there's nothing fancy going on. And my set will upgrade to master rank for the Iceborne section. Speaking of skills, there are maybe 3 to think about for this weapon, one of which is pretty much compulsory. Slugger, Stamina Thief, and Horn Maestro. Slugger boosts KO potential, Stamina Thief does the same for exhaust damage, and Horn Maestro makes your song effects last longer, meaning you don't need to top up your buffs every 2 seconds. With those messages out the way, I reckon we can get started. First off, let's talk about the basic face button attacks. Once you've drawn your weapon, pressing triangle or the top face button will do this left hook, which hits a fairly wide arc around you. Then pressing it again in succession will do a forward slam, which is also the draw attack. Continuing to do this, just spamming the one button, will cause you to cycle between the two moves indefinitely. What's nice is that you can actually circumvent the need to press the attack button twice if you want to do the forward slam by holding the left stick in a direction when you press triangle. This rule applies to all face button attacks, so keep that in mind. Circle then is a right hook with a slightly different arc than the left hook, besides it just being a different direction. The moving input for circle is what's called the flourish, which first hits low, then very high. Finally, by pressing triangle and circle together, you'll perform a back slam. This moves you back a fair bit, further than the forward slam moves you forward, and also can hit quite high in the air. Then last of all, the moving input for triangle and circle together is the super pound, the most damaging move in the Hunting Horn's arsenal, the base world. Both attacks tied to triangle and circle are fairly high commitment, so keep that in mind. And that's all the basic moves for the face buttons. Yeah, no fancy combo finishers, no gauges to charge, no worrying about this or that. It's a basic moveset. And you might be thinking there aren't any combos here at all besides spamming a single button for an awkward repetition of 2 moves over and over, but you'd be wrong. This weapon, with the moves I've shown you so far, can combo freely between all of them with no restrictions. There aren't combo paths here, we're wandering freely in a combo field where you can move freely between 2 points with nothing arbitrarily getting in your way. Anyway, I'll stop gushing about that for now and let's add a bit of complexity to this stuff. I've been holding back some information for the sake of introducing new concepts at a digestible pace, forgive me. For each of the buttons I talked about, there's a note associated to each of them. For future reference, I'll call the triangle note the top note, the circle note the right note, and the triangle circle note the double note.
If you know about double notes from Generations Ultimate, forget about them for this video because they aren't in this game.
Also, quick note here, you can perform an aerial attack with any one of the face button inputs. The animation will be the same, but the note that will come out of it will depend on what button you pressed. The note system is where the moveset simplicity starts making a lot more sense, because if you had varying combo paths you wouldn't be able to string notes together in any order you'd like, and use an attack of your choosing at the same time. The reason you might want to do that is because specific note combinations will set up songs to play. Playing the top note twice always sets up the same song regardless, but otherwise, the colour of the other 2 notes will determine what songs you have available to you. But how do you tell what songs you have? 2 ways. In the smithy or anywhere else you can look at weapon information, the last page of that info will show you your list of songs, and the other way is to look at the top right of the screen in a quest. This shows your full list of available songs with your specific hunting horn. You might want to change this setting to this if you plan on playing this weapon a lot, just so you can see the songs all the time. So you know about songs now, but how do you play them? Easy, the recital is just one button, R2. As I mentioned earlier, this song is on every horn, and does 3 things. Firstly, it increases your movement speed with your weapon drawn, but it also boosts your attack, quite significantly, and prevents your attacks from bouncing off a monster regardless of sharpness. If you're a keen eye, you'll notice that I only have one of those effects active at the moment. That's because songs actually have 2 stages. Playing the song again will give me Mind's Eye to prevent bouncing and the attack up. This applies to all songs that function as buffs, so things like healing songs don't apply here.
See my Hour Plus rant for more criticisms about why healing songs suck in most cases.
You can tell if a song you've played is on its second level by looking at the list and checking its colour. If the song is in white text, the effect isn't active. If it's green, you only have the first level active, and purple means it's fully active. So playing a song twice gives you its full effect, but that's slow and annoying and you need to set it up twice as well. That's why you can do something called an encore at the end of a recital before you flip your horn back onto your shoulder. Pressing R2 again at the end of a recital will cause you to play the song you just played again, amplifying its effect and or extending its duration. Cool, so you can play a song's full effect in one go, but we can go further. Let's set up a few songs now. As you can see, we can stack up to 3 songs to be played at will, playable with R2, R2 and triangle, and R2 and circle respectively. And letting the song play out in full when you have multiple songs stacked up allows you to play them all at once, and the following encore will boost the effects of all of them. This is very good for utility because it allows you to play every one of your songs in maybe 2 rounds of recitals. For some horns, just 1 round is enough to play all of the songs you want to play. And one last thing, I said at the start that this weapon is about positioning, and I meant that. Both the recitals and encores, similar to note attacks, have a relationship with the left stick. Recitals can be played standing or moving, though the moving one is really slow, so you won't get much good use out of it. Encores though, are where you can really go in any direction. To finish up this talk about songs, there's a couple of extra tips I'd like to give as well. First off, you can actually use recitals and encores for damage by setting up songs first, because playing songs hits the target for an extra tick of damage in the form of a shockwave. And the other thing is that your songs only last so long, so get a feel for which songs last how long and play them periodically in a fight so they don't run out. In this section I'll be going into a few straggling bits of this weapon and expanding on some nuance I glossed over earlier. First up, there are a couple of ways to play notes that I didn't mention, namely the hilt stab and the flourish. The flourish is more simple. Basically you can press another note button at the second swing and you'll get that note as well, allowing this move to play 2 notes during one attack. The hilt stab is more interesting. If you hold back on the left stick, relative to your character, though this can be changed in settings, and press a note button in succession after doing another attack, you'll do a quick stab with your hilt, performing whatever note you input for the attack. Similar to aerial attacks, this animation will be the same regardless of the note you play. Also, a quick note on aerial attacks, you can recite in the air, but the song will only play when you hit the ground. Next up, evade cancelling. This is generally an important thing to do in any Monster Hunter game, and it's probably a concept you'll be familiar with if you've played other action RPGs before, but it makes up part of the core flow of this weapon because the cooldowns take so long here. If you roll after the main part of your attack, say after your super pound has hit the ground or when your hook loses momentum, you'll roll away in whatever direction you input it with, cancelling the long recovery animation after the attack. You can even do it halfway through a flourish or between the damage and the buff parts of a recital or encore attack. Speaking of recitals and encores, I'd like to expand a bit on those, specifically their directional variants. First off, you can turn during them, so that helps angling and follow-up attacks. Besides that, earlier I made it sound like there are only 2 kinds of basic recitals, static and moving, but there are actually a few. There's the static one, sure, and that's almost always the same, except if you follow it on from a hilt stab, in which case you'll do an uppercut and play from there. I won't list off every variation, but I recommend you experiment with them and get a good feel for the system. Try inputting a direction while pressing R2 after doing a note attack. And last of all, regarding the top note, there will be a point in your weapon upgrade tree when this note will change colour from white to purple. This means your songs will become more potent. Attack up S becomes L, and the L encore becomes XL, and they'll have more complex inputs to boot. Now that you've learned what the weapon can do in the base game, I think it's time we had a look at what they added with Iceborne. Simply put, they added one note, the echo note, played with L2. It functions like a hilt stab in that you need to follow it on from another attack in order to play it, because if you just press L2 you'll aim your slinger, and you can't use the hilt stab to play this one either. But you wouldn't want to because, well, I mean look at it. Look at how many hits it does. The songs this note can play are interesting in that they're the only 2-note songs in the game aside from Self-Improvement. What's also interesting about them is their nature as songs. Like normal songs, the colour of the notes in them affect the buff. But unlike other songs, playing most of them spawns a bubble at the end of the weapon. Touching the bubble activates the song effect, and touching it again or touching another bubble of the same effect will effectively encore it. Now, I said most of the Echo songs were bubbles, not all. That's because 2 of them produce a damaging blast rather than a buff. The Impact and Dragon Echo Waves. One does a huge amount of impact damage to stun monsters and the other does huge dragon element damage. And thanks to these following the same rules as normal songs, you can both stack and encore them, meaning you can play 3 Echo Waves in a row and encore them to produce the most damaging move in the Hunting Horn's arsenal. Excellent for wake up hits. This was just to teach the basic mechanics of the weapon and let people know how much less confusing it is than it looks. I didn't go over song effects or that sort of thing because players tend to naturally find specific weapons that they prefer to use most of the time by themselves. Thanks for stopping by, and happy hunting!